I know that this election is basically about nothing but fear of the other candidate and general feelings and vibes right now, since neither one of these people are talking much about policy. But now that Kamala Harris has, gasp, a policy page on her website, which she did not have until this last week, I thought we would take an episode to talk about the differences in Trump and Harris's policies. We'll go topic by topic and talk about the differences, the overlaps, the really vague parts, and the ridiculous parts that are probably unconstitutions. So let's get into it. Welcome to The Homeless Conservative, a show about principled politics for exhausted citizens. I'm your host, Blake Fisher, and I'm a political junkie so that you don't necessarily have to be, and you don't really even have to be a political junkie to read these plans. They're basically bullet points on their websites. So, feel free to go read them. We'll put links in the show notes. Even with my ADHD, I'm pretty sure that I didn't need to be a political junkie to read these plans. I also took some stuff not just from their website, but from the speeches they've made on the campaign trail. So there probably are, there's some things that are not written down that they've talked about. And in some of those situations, we do not have specifics because, for a lot of reasons. One, neither one of these candidates want to get into the specifics because the point of them telling you about a policy proposal at this point in the race, they're just trying to get votes. That is their only job right now. They're not going to say anything that could be possibly unpopular with the demographic of people that they need to win this election. So, for example, Kamala Harris is switching to not wanting to ban fracking. She says her values haven't changed. Whatever. She's never really answered the question. The real reason, and she just won't say it, but I think that people would give her some credit if she just said it. The reason she's not for banning fracking now is because she must win Pennsylvania to get into the White House. That's it. There's a lot of fracking. There's a lot of natural gas exploration in Pennsylvania. She needs to win Pennsylvania. Both candidates need to win Pennsylvania. That was Trump's steel tariffs, essentially, back when he was president, was just to, make nice with Pennsylvania voters, okay? So this is coming down to about 7 states. That's also the no tax on tips situation. The reason they're saying no tax on tips, Nevada is one of these swing states. Nevada, I guess, is really technically how it's, sorry, I'm from Oklahoma. And we make everything sound weird if it has a vowel in it. And so, Nevada has a lot of tip workers. A lot of people in Vegas are working on tips. This is a way to get people that are low propensity voters who might not, have not already made up their mind, because keep in mind, most of the country has decided they're either all in for Trump or they're all in for Kamala Harris. That's it. They're not going to change their mind based on anything either one of these people say, even if they totally flip positions. The policies don't actually matter because they don't like Kamala Harris, so they're voting for Trump, or they don't like Trump, so they're voting for Kamala Harris. That is most of the country right now. There are a few people that are still looking at this and going, man, I don't know who I'm going to pick, or haven't even been paying attention to this point. Maybe don't know about any of the crazy things that have gone on in the news. I'm sure they have to have known that Trump's now been attempted to be assassinated twice, and we had a debate. People are eating pets, not really, but this is the kind of thing that probably has trickled down to the kinds of voters that Kamala Harris and Donald Trump are both going after in places like Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, let's see, what are the other ones? Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, Nevada, Arizona. North Carolina's kind of coming back into play a little bit. Georgia. So handful of states, 7 or 8, that are in play, and they are going after, that's why their policies are overlapping so much, is because they're both going for no tax on tips, because we might as well both have the same policy because we're going after the same voter group. And it's sort of a way to, if Trump comes up with it first and Kamala then jumps on it, well, then you can't choose based on the policy difference, and you'll go to some other factor, like the fact that, you don't trust one of them or something. So most of this policy stuff is not real detailed because they don't have to get into the details right now, and we're not even sure they would do these things. But I've got to go with what they're saying. I've got to go with what they've written down on their website. I don't really believe that either one of these candidates, Kamala Harris or Donald Trump, would stick to these plans. I don't think Donald Trump has a principle that guides him. I don't think he has ideas that guide him. I don't think he has values that guide him. I think that he kind of goes with whatever he feels like works in the moment for him. That's why he is less pro-life than he used to be. It's not just a moderation for the general election. It's that he feels like he's getting burned by the pro-choice crowd in this specific issue. So we'll go through them. I'm not going to do every single thing because A, I don't think most people care about most of these things. B, a lot of people don't. These aren't totally fleshed out policies. So if they're not really fleshed out, I don't want to talk about them too much. Thirdly, there are just certain issues that are more important to voters, and let's talk about those actually. So these are the issues, according to Pew Research. This is from August 26th through September 2nd. So it's a little behind, but not terribly for issue kind of based stuff. This is what percentage of registered voters who say each is very important. So these are things like these are the issues that people have polled said are very important to them. Number one, with 81% of voters, is the economy. Number two is healthcare with 65% of voters. Number three is Supreme Court appointments, 63% of voters. Foreign policy, 62%. Violent crime, 61%. Immigration, 61%. And then we've got like gun policy, abortion, racial and ethnic inequality, climate change. Climate change is all the way at the bottom with racial and ethnic inequality. So I'm not going to talk much about climate change because, frankly, the voters don't seem to care about it much. And most importantly, the people that are going to vote in this election and potentially sway it really probably don't care about any of these issues. That's unfortunate. I think people should care about these issues, but and I've got a chart if you're watching on the video that shows the percentage of Trump supporters and Harris supporters that think those things. So like 93% of Trump supporters think the economy is their number one issue. Harris supporters, it's 68% that think the economy is very important to them. So there are a lot of issues here. I'm just kind of going to go through them in this order because I feel like let's just stick with this order. Okay. So this is, where we're going to go. So a couple more caveats just to I'm admittedly weighing what I talk about a little bit here too, because there are a couple issues that weren't high up, but I think are really important to talk about. And I'm also not going to talk about like the ones at the bottom of the list, like abortion. We know where the candidates stand on abortion. I also, frankly, don't think anyone will get anything done on abortion because neither one of them are going to have 60 votes in the Senate. So, frankly, Donald Trump couldn't pass an abortion ban. Kamala Harris couldn't pass a right to abortion unless one of the two parties gets rid of the filibuster, which I think would be very dangerous, and I will talk about in a little while. But let's actually get to the stuff. So let's talk about the economy, okay? So the first thing we need to talk about is economic plans because it's at the top of everyone's list. So let's talk about Harris's economic plans. She's got a lot of stuff she's thrown out, and most of the stuff on her website is just kind of platitudes. It's a lot of opportunity, and it's a lot of middle class, and it's just kind of buzzwords. It doesn't really lay out a ton about what the actual plans are going to be. So I'm not super. It's kind of a weird thing to talk about, because this is not fully fleshed out on her website. It's not fully fleshed out in her speeches. She certainly has not answered the questions in interviews. She's only done 2 of, and she kind of dodged a lot of these questions at the debate stage and just kind of said these things that made people feel good. And that's probably because that will work. So here are the things that she wants to do. She wants to say no taxes raised. She claims that she's not going to raise taxes on anyone making less than $400,000 a year. So that means she's keeping most of the Trump tax cuts. So as much as Democrats railed on Trump's tax cuts, essentially they want to keep 95% of those tax cuts. They're only talking about raising things like the corporate tax or raising taxes on people that are earning more than $1 million a year. So they're wanting to keep most of the Trump tax cuts in place. I like most of the Trump tax cuts. I do wish they came with some cutting of spending as well, because they haven't. And that means we are adding more and more to the debt. But one important thing to realize is that she's claiming that she doesn't want to raise taxes on anyone making less than $400,000. So she only wants to raise taxes on people that are making more than $400,000. According to Cato, which is an institute, cato.org, confiscating all of the annual income earned by Americans above $400,000 would not cover the currently projected deficits, let alone any additional spending or lower taxes. So if she's talking about cutting more taxes on people that earn less than $400,000, she wants to make it up by taxing rich people more and taxing capital gains and taxing corporations more. But the point is, you can't tax people in that bracket enough to cover all the spending. You just can't do it. So her plan is definitely adding to not just the deficit annually, but the debt, which is already at $33 trillion. Okay, so her tax plan, not great for the debt. Neither is Trump's. Spoiler alert when we get to it. So she also wants to raise the corporate tax from 21 to 28%. It was lowered to 21% by the Trump tax cuts. I think lower corporate tax rates are good. It encourages businesses to be here and corporations to be here in America. That is how we're competing with other countries to have businesses in our country, is lower corporate tax rates. So I am generally for it. I can't remember exactly where. At 21, we are in the lower group of countries. If we go to 28, we would be in the higher group of countries on taxes. So there are incentives here. Just quite frankly, companies will move to other countries if they feel like they get better, because their whole goal, if you're a corporation, is to make a profit. If you've got to move somewhere that has lower corporate tax rates to do so, corporations do it. So it's worth considering. There's a balancing act there. Yes, we should tax corporations, but we shouldn't overtax them, because then we will discourage them from moving here. So just a thing to think about. She wants to quadruple the stock buyback tax that was in the Inflation Reduction Act. A lot of these things already were not new. They were brand new in the Inflation Reduction Act, which didn't really have anything to do with inflation reduction. It was really just all about kind of the Green New Deal with a different name. It was all about green energy stuff, but wants to raise that from 1% to 4%. She wants to raise the top rate of income tax to 39.6%. Those also would then raise based on inflation. She wants to tax long-term capital gains at 28% for taxable income above $1 million. She also wants to tax unrealized gains at death above a $5 million exemption. So if you have less than $5 million in assets in unrealized gains, no taxes. If you've got $5 million, you start getting taxes on those unrealized gains when you die for your inheritance, or $10 million for couples. And then she wants to tax the carried interest above $400,000 earners. So then again, this is above $400,000. If you make less than that, you don't have to worry about it. She wants to change the deduction limit for startups from $5,000 to $50,000. I actually think this is a decent idea. I'm okay with giving tax breaks to entrepreneurs and new businesses. I think this is a good thing to encourage small businesses. I think it's actually a decent thing. I'd have to look at the math on how bad it is for the deficit. But look, almost every one of these bullet points that I'm going to talk about for the entire show is going to be bad for the debt and the deficit. That's just how it is. No one cares about fiscal responsibility anymore. Republicans don't care about it. Democrats don't care about it. Basically, the only people that care about it is whoever's not in power at the time, whoever's not in the White House, or whoever doesn't have control. All of a sudden, they're all for fiscal responsibility. Once they get the checkbook, though, they're just writing checks to people. If we're going to write checks to people, I'd rather it be in the form of tax credits for people that are doing, like, adding to the economy. If you start a business, you are adding to the economy, I am more likely to give you a tax break than someone that is not. I just think that's a smart way to do it. She also wants to increase the child tax credit for newborns to $6,000 for the first year of their life. It's currently $3,000, but she would bump it to $6,000 for that first year. Republicans have a similar plan, except they just want to bump it across the board to $5,000. She wants to provide $25,000 in tax credits for first-time home buyers over 4 years. Actually, let's get to that in a second. We'll talk about housing stuff in a little bit. So the Tax Foundation, all that stuff that I just mentioned off, the Tax Foundation says that it would do this. Over 10 years, it would raise $1.7 trillion, essentially. That's the taxes that she's talking about adding. But it would be a negative 2% long-run GDP. Negative 1.2% on long-run wages, and negative 786,000 jobs. So on net, her tax plan might lose us almost 1 million jobs and lower GDP by 2% and lower wages. Yes, it does get some revenue. It's negative on all the other stuff. So we do have positive revenue, but we have negative GDP, negative wages, negative jobs. This is, of course, these are top-line estimates from the Tax Foundation. They're always estimates. This does not mean this is definitely going to happen. There's all sorts of nuance because we don't know what her actual plan is. We're basing it off some of the bullet points and stuff, but that's their initial estimate. I think that's worth paying attention to. Well, let's talk about Trump. So Trump wants 20% 10 to 20% tariffs on all imports. Just to explain briefly how tariff works, although you could go watch this video that I talk about tariffs specifically if you want to on YouTube. Tariffs are just taxes that are paid on imports. So they're paid by whoever brings that import in. Tariffs those costs get passed down to consumers eventually. This is a tricky way to tax people. It's like, oh, it's just tariffs. But everything we import, everything. So that means, or at least that's Trump's plan, is to tax 10 to 20% on everything. So for example, middle of winter, you want avocados. We're not growing them here in America. You got to import avocados. 10 to 20% tariff on avocados that come from another country. Well, those are going to come over, and we're going to have a 10% to 20% increase in the cost of those avocados at the grocery store. That's a very simple example, obviously, but it gets more complex with this. For example, during his first term, he had taxes on aluminum and steel. They did not work out the way he wanted them to. His steel and aluminum tariffs lost jobs, and all the tariffs combined shrunk our GDP by 0.08%. Okay, so almost 1%, 0.1%, sorry. By the way, steel consuming jobs, that would be like if you build a washer and dryer, for example, you're a company like Maytag and you build washers and dryers and there's steel parts in it. Steel consuming jobs outnumber steel producing ones 80-1 in this country, but this was a play for Pennsylvania, like I mentioned earlier, where there's a lot of steel jobs. There's only like a few thousand steel jobs that actually are in the like steel manufacturing thing. So basically everything that had steel or aluminum in it got more expensive. So it raised costs for consumers. This is part of the reason we've got inflation. When people complain about costs being high, Trump's tariffs are part of it. Biden continued most of Trump's tariffs. So we've been feeling the squeeze of this for several years now. And these were targeted. These Trump tariffs were steel and aluminum and essentially mostly targeted at China. He wants to take that was already bad, those things I just mentioned, and he wants to apply it to every import from every country. Doesn't matter if they're allies, doesn't matter if they're friends, doesn't matter if they're enemies. We'll have more tariffs, obviously, on people that we think are bad actors. I'm fine with those kind of tariffs. If we're going to punish China for dumping cheap steel and trying to artificially lower steel prices in America to like destroy the steel industry, that is one thing. Open to that. But we rely on imports. For example, again, food is a really great example. We can't grow all that stuff all year long in America. So we import a lot of fruit and stuff from Central and South America, for example, in the winter, specifically when things like cherries you can't get in the winter in America. So they are more expensive naturally, but we're just going to make them even more expensive because we can't have an economy that's entirely like built in America. Everything's made in America. Free trade is good. We don't have every resource we possibly need in America. We just don't. Now we have a lot of resources and a lot more than a lot of other countries. Free trade is a good thing. Like I said, I won't rant too much about tariffs, but I think this would be absolutely terrible for the economy. I think it was already bad, his last set of tariffs. If he applies them to everything, this is going to be bad. And if you don't believe me, let's look at that tax foundation again. So let's look at Trump's tax plan. His revenue, 10-year revenue, would be, it would lose $1.3 trillion. That's a problem. Okay, so at least Kamala Harris's does get us some revenue. Obviously, if you slash taxes, if you increase tariffs, we've got less revenue. Okay, 0.2% long run GDP problem. We do have an uptick in wages by 0.6%. Loss of 387,000 jobs. So to compare those two together, sorry if you're not watching and you're listening, neither one of them are good. Kamala Harris has more revenue, but way bigger hit on GDP, bigger hit on wages, and bigger hit on jobs. So Harris's tax plan does raise revenue that the government just gets to spend on stupid crap. Trump's is less damaging, but has less revenue too. So Trump's increases the debt a little bit more. Harris's doesn't increase the debt as much, but is much worse for jobs, GDP, things like that. This is, like I said, according to the Tax Foundation's initial estimates. And by the way, these Trump estimates are for if he did the 10% tariff on all imports instead of 20%. I don't see how he could get Congress to go along with either one of those. I don't think it's very good. But then again, he's got Republicans by the cojones, and they'll do kind of whatever he says. And that worries me a little bit because I don't think that, like I said, I think this is a bad idea. He wants to do 60% tariffs on all Chinese imports. He wants to slash regulations, although he does not specify which ones. He wants to cut taxes. He wants to cut the corporate rate from 21 to 20%, increase the CTC to the child tax credit to $5,000, as I mentioned, from $3,000. He wants to exempt Social Security benefits from taxation. This is one of those things, in principle, I would be okay with because it feels like double dipping. I already paid the taxes on this stuff, and then this was taken in the form of payroll deductions, and now I'm getting taxed on the Social Security benefits that I get later on. But right now, I just don't know that we should be talking about cutting more taxes when we've got $33 trillion in debt and we're just adding to it every single day. That seems really problematic to me. So I don't know that we should be talking about more groups of people. By the way, you'll notice, exempting Social Security benefits gets him an old vote. People who are on Social Security and relying on that for their income, that's the vote he's trying to get here by saying this. I'm just not sure it's wise right now in the financial situation we are in currently. So, as far as reliable, sort of low, he wants to do reliable and low cost energy. We'll talk more about energy in a little bit. I just don't know that this stuff matters. So I think that Trump's plan is mildly better, but neither one of them are good for the debt. Just good to keep in mind. So I'd say Trump edges out on that a little bit. So let's talk about energy now, because that's sort of to do with the economy as well. So Kamala Harris wants to, other than like bragging about the Inflation Reduction Act, which they're just sort of owning that had nothing to do with inflation. She doesn't really mention what she'll do specifically with energy. She doesn't mention anything about nuclear. She doesn't really specifically say anything about oil and natural gas other than she has said out loud that she won't ban fracking. But, to be clear about the fracking thing, the president doesn't have that much control over this stuff anyway. The president can only do things on federal leases. So, if I put an oil rig in my backyard, the federal government can't tell me I can't. Well, that's a bad situation. That's a bad analogy. But the point is, the president and Congress really have control over federal leases. And the truth is, if the president did have control, 2023 would not have drilled more oil than any country in the history of the world in America, because Biden doesn't want that to happen. It's proof that he doesn't have that much control over it. So when they say they were going to ban fracking, they can actually only do that. The president can only do that on federal land. They can't tell everyone they can't do the practice anymore. They would require Congress. I don't see that very realistic. But again, this is just a ploy for Pennsylvania voters. So you can also expect more sort of green BS and handouts to wind and solar, despite them, not, I think, being able to be competitive. I would like the federal government to get out of the incentivizing of different industries. I think it's bad. I think that the only reason we have the amount of wind and solar we have is because it's so subsidized. I don't like pitting different industries against each other like that, where we'd say, oh, we're gonna pick this one as a winner, and we're gonna get lots of tax subsidies, and we're gonna try to make it cheaper, and it costs us taxpayers money without really those things needing to be competitive. It's one thing when we're like encouraging people to develop the technology. That's one thing that I'm a little more okay with the government doing, is saying, hey, we want here's a thing we want, and if you can do it, we're going to give you tax credits for it. This is good, especially when it comes to national security situations specifically. But I don't love the idea of like government subsidizing, like even corn, for example. Like, why does the federal government subsidize corn? It encourages people to ditch other farm, things they could do, and they're doing corn instead because it can turn into ethanol. It's also sort of weird that we are subsidizing turning food into gasoline. That's a strange thing too. So I just don't like these subsidies in general, and that's my personal opinion. So I certainly don't like the green ones either. I think they should compete on their own. As far as energy for Trump, he mentions unleashing American energy production, including nuclear. So he does mention nuclear. I should also give credit. Last month before July, I don't know. This summer has been insane with all the news stuff, but Congress and Biden did sign a thing to deregulate some of the nuclear energy stuff a little bit, just to try to get nuclear power plants online and up to date quicker, because we realize we need more of them and we need to lean on nuclear some more. So that's a good thing that Congress actually recently did. Got no press coverage because it was like the week that Biden dropped out of the race. And so obviously that's a bigger news story. But the Congress does do stuff sometimes. So sort of, again, though, going back, Trump is trying to make you think that we are not drilling oil and not getting any natural gas out of the ground. It's just not true. Like I said, 2023, we drilled more oil in 2023 than any country in any year in history ever. Okay? So, Biden has increased production, not because of anything he did specifically. It's just that technology has changed. There's more production. The wells are popping off, whatever the reason is. We drilled more oil last year than we ever have. So, you would think that Kamala Harris would brag about that, but she's trying to keep her base happy too, who don't like drilling, who don't like fracking, which is foolish. We should use the energy sources we have, especially with natural gas. Guys, natural gas has half the emissions of coal. So switching our power plants from coal to natural gas cuts emissions in half. So if you actually think climate change is an existential threat, that should be a good step, is cutting our emissions in half. It's ridiculous to think that we can go to 100% renewable overnight like that. We could talk about energy a lot. The truth is, I think Trump's the winner on this one. I don't think it's terribly, as a conservative, it's not hard to see that he's going to do more for just energy in general. And I'm not against the clean stuff. I'm not against wind. I'm not against solar. I'm not against electric cars. I just think they should have to compete with the other things. I think that electric cars should have to compete with gas-powered cars. I don't think that we should have subsidies for electric cars because, frankly, do you know who's buying an electric car? Rich people. Rich people that don't need the $7,000 tax credit, okay? So we're giving tax credit to rich people to drive a car that makes them feel good about themselves. And frankly, it costs us a lot of money. I think that if you want to drive an electric car, drive an electric car. It's totally fine with me. I like electric cars. I think they're pretty cool. However, I just don't think you should get a tax credit for buying one over a gas engine. I don't think we need to incentivize like that. I think we need to incentivize people by the market. If there's a demand for electric cars, let's do it. He also wants to roll back the sort of Biden electric vehicle mandate. I think that's a good thing. I think Biden's electric vehicle mandate is terrible because it is forcing car companies to make electric cars, even if people don't want to buy them. It's going to be bad for the auto industry. They claim they care about Detroit and Ohio and American car companies. It will hurt American car companies if they are forced to create a car that people don't want to buy, and they can't make a car that people do want to buy. You have to go to the markets at some point on this. So, I would say Trump's the winner on energy if I'm just picking based on policy, not looking at anything else, just policies. Okay, so let's talk about housing. I briefly touched on this a second ago. Kamala Harris claims to have put forward a comprehensive plan, but I can't find the comprehensive plan. I can find the bullet points. So she says this plan will build 3 million new rental units in homes that are affordable. Doesn't really specify how. Maybe I didn't dig far enough into the weeds to find how she plans on doing this. This is just she says she wants to do. I'd like to see the plans. She says she wants to cut red tape to make sure we can build more housing faster. So that sounds like deregulation, but she's calling it cut red tape instead of deregulation. Trump tends to call it deregulation. It's the same thing. The red tape is regulation. So they both claim they want to deregulate some housing stuff. The problem with both of their plans is that the federal government doesn't have a lot of the red tape that's being put up to prevent these things from happening. It's state and local governments that have the red tape for building housing. We have a supply and demand problem. We have more demand than we have supply when it comes to housing and rental units. We need more rental units. We need more housing. That's how you solve this problem. So anything that's encouraging on the demand side is going to raise prices. If you encourage it on the supply side, that should even out prices. The truth is, some people don't want that. The truth is, if you've got a house that is highly valued, you don't want the value to go down because there are more houses being built where there's more competition. Again, I talk about competition in the market. The housing market's the exact same thing. People don't like to admit it because when their house is worth a lot of money, they don't want houses being built around them that would drive down the cost of their house if they want to sell it. That's what this turns into, is a bunch of people that don't want this kind of stuff to happen in their backyard. They don't want new housing. They don't want new rental units. It's the not in my backyard, the NIMBY crowd. There is sort of a turn towards the YIMBY crowd, the yes in my backyard crowd, but the truth is this is more of a local thing, and the president at best could work with governors and mayors to say, hey, let's change zoning laws, encourage them to cut some of this tape. That's really where the red tape could be cut. It's not really at the federal level. She wants to outlaw price fixing of rentals. She wants to implement rent control. which is not constitutional probably. It's also a terrible idea and has never worked. It only leads to fewer rental units, which leads to higher cost. So she wants to ban algorithm-driven price setting tools for landlords. This is like if you have an Airbnb, for example, you can use a company called like AirDNA, and it will set the price automatically based on demand. So if it's a high demand week in the city you're in, it will raise the price. It will lower it on certain nights to incentivize people to book it. So it just does all that stuff. She wants to outlaw algorithm-driven price setting tools for landlords. She also wants to remove the tax benefits for investors who buy large numbers of single-family rental homes. She doesn't specify what that number is. But, I have lots of friends that do this. They have, a dozen rental houses that they buy one at a time. They remodel, they do all the work. It's a ton of hard work. And then they rent those houses. These are couples. These are not corporate overlords. These are just like people that's what they do for their living. They go buy a house, they flip it, they rent it. Sometimes they sell it. So we don't know what the number is. Is it 10? Is it 20? I don't know. But this could affect a lot of people. The problem with the rent talk that we have in this country is that Kamala Harris likes to frame every landlord as like an evil corporate, giant fat cat. Most of the landlords in this country, she calls them corporate landlords. Most landlords in the country are not corporations. They're small businesses, essentially. They are couples, they're families, they're people with small real estate portfolios. These are not gigantic portfolios. There certainly are people that do that. The point is, I need to know where the line is on this because this could negatively affect a lot of people. I frankly don't think rent control works. It's historically never worked. There's case after case. There was a Stanford study. I will try to put in the notes if I remember about San Francisco specifically and the rent control policies there. There have been studies on New York, sort of a famous rent control place. New York, for example, has enough space for everyone to be in an apartment. The problem is a lot of people just shut down the building. They just empty it out. They don't let anyone live there because it's not worth the cost of upkeep. They can't do it for what the rent control is set at. So they just abandon the buildings and no one lives there. And they just sit on it. So there's empty buildings in New York and San Francisco and places like that. Because if you own that building and I'm like, I can't make a profit on this, you're not going to rent it to people. So, or they turn it into places that aren't rentals. So they turn it into office space or they turn it into other retail, things like that they don't have rent control caps on. She also wants to give $25,000 in down payment support. I assume that's cash. So I assume that's a direct payment from taxpayers to banks for mortgages, for new home buyers specifically. And she also wants to still include a $10,000 tax credit for those first-time home buyers. So that's $30,000 she wants to give to all first-time home buyers. If you don't increase the supply side of the housing problem, I think you can guess what will happen. That will raise home prices by about $30,000 because all of a sudden you will have even more demand because you'll have not just the demand of people that want to buy houses, you'll have the demand of those people, plus they've got $30,000 to blow through. So they can pad the price of the house they wanted to get by $30,000 if they want to. It will raise prices. Every economist thinks so. It's a terrible, terrible, terrible plan. As far as Trump goes, again, vague cut regulation. I would like to know what regulation specifically at the federal level he would cut that would help housing be built. Again, I think this is probably more of a let's talk to mayors, let's talk to governors to do that kind of stuff. He also wants to reduce mortgage rates by slashing inflation. That's a direct quote from the website. I don't know what that means exactly because, he doesn't have any control on slashing inflation. Now, he says he wants the Fed to not be as independent. He would like to be able to control the Fed and tell them when to drop rates and raise rates. I think we need an independent Fed, though. I think it's a terrible, terrible, terrible idea to let the president do that on a whim. So if he needs to get reelected, he can be like, let's lower interest rates. It's a bad idea, bad for the economy. So reducing inflation, the problem is he could definitely, obviously they're going to do a rate cut this week. You should see mortgage rates go down a little bit, in the aftermath of that, if they continue to cut the rates. But we're not going to get down to these like 2% rates that we had pre the pandemic. Just don't think that's going to happen. He can't slash inflation. That's not like a thing he can do as the president. He can implement other policies that help monetarily and help the economy for sure. The Congress can as well. But if the president had the ability to just like slash inflation, Biden would have done it. This has not been helpful for Biden. It's what got him essentially kicked off the ticket eventually. It's Kamala Harris's problem too. She can't really talk about inflation without, she's going to have to talk about the fact that her and Biden's administration is partly responsible. So is Trump's. Like I said, his tariffs, his injection into the economy that wasn't necessary. I mean, certainly could be argued was more necessary during COVID than Biden's, but he spent a lot of money too. He spent more than any other president other than Obama and George W. Bush, who each had 2 terms. Trump spent, third less of those 2, but those guys both had 2 terms. So in 1 term, Trump spent a lot of money. That's inflationary. But Congress and the president have very little power over these regulations that constrain housing development. So they'd have to find some way to sort of incentivize it with funds, sort of like they do with Medicare or highway stuff. This is how I've read an article that said they should do this based on how they did the drinking age. So how we got a national drinking age of 21 is the federal government said, hey, look, we want to raise the drinking age to 21. We will withhold funding for highway stuff if you don't raise your drinking age. And everyone jumped on board. We're going to get into a weird situation with this stuff, I think, with this Supreme Court that we have about what the Commerce Clause in the Constitution really means. I think it's pretty obvious they've laid the sort of traps to say they're going to sort of deregulate. I don't know if that's the right word. They're going to say the Commerce Clause does not mean everything Congress has said it does for the last several decades. Commerce Clause, really brief, super quick explanation. Most people interpret it as, okay, Congress can regulate commerce between states. So if someone in Oklahoma is selling something to someone in Arkansas, they can regulate that. But there was a case a long time ago during the Great Depression when they were trying to regulate how much wheat people could buy or make, actually, just how much they could grow. And the federal government went after a guy that was growing more wheat than he was allowed to, even though he wasn't selling it. He was just using it for his own purposes. And he said, look, I'm not selling it. I'm not selling it to anyone across state lines. I'm not selling it at all. So you shouldn't be able to regulate it. He lost the Supreme Court case. I think it's one of the worst Supreme Court losses ever in the sense that it allowed Congress to then say, we can regulate anything based on the Commerce Clause. So they can regulate also, they claim the right to be able to do all sorts of stuff that I don't think our framers that wrote the Constitution actually thought that the Congress should have that power. And so I think this will come up with the Supreme Court at some point, and they will strike down that previous decision to say that, look, if there's not commerce between states, you can't do it. Kamala Harris is going to have the same problem with the Commerce Clause with her rent control problems, because she's trying to say a local landlord can't raise the prices of his stuff that he's renting. And I think at some point we're going to have a fight that says, how can Congress or the president have anything to do with commerce that's within one state? They don't have the control over that. The state does. The state of Oklahoma can tell me what I can and can't do there, but the federal government can't. I think that'll come up in the next 5 years or so. I think for sure we'll see that happen. But so there's even questions about how Trump could do that with incentivizing with funds, with saying, oh, we'll give you highway money if you create a state law that says the drinking age is 21. That's a little different because they can say, that's probably not illegal or unconstitutional, but saying something like, hey, you've got to control rents or we're going to withhold the highway funding. I don't think that would work in the future. It would be legal right now. Don't know if it would work though. Same thing. Again, I think we got to encourage states and cities to change zoning laws and deregulate building. The problem right now, the reason we don't have affordable housing is because it is not profitable to build affordable housing. There's so much red tape that goes into building a place, so much permitting, especially if you look at a map of the housing costs and look at California. Like the whole state of California is overrun with really expensive housing because it's very hard to build a property in San Francisco, in LA, places where it takes 10 years to get permits and stuff. Developers are not going to develop there, quite frankly. And so that's what you got to do. I think that's what the president should do is talk to governors, talk to mayors, deregulate some of this stuff at the local level. That's really what we have to do. As far as winner loser on this one, Trump edges it out, but his plan isn't very detailed at all. So I'm barely giving an edge on this one. Kamala's plan is terrible. It would not do anything. I just don't know if Trump's does either. He's just saying he's going to cut regulation. I'm just not sure what power he has to do that. I don't think the housing problem is a problem solved at the federal level. I think it's solved at the state and local level. I've not seen any great proposal on the federal level from either one of these candidates, but I'm giving Trump just the edge just because he doesn't have as many unconstitutional things as Kamala Harris does. Okay, let's get to Supreme Court appointments because that was at the top of the list. Look, I understand why this is an important thing for everyone. Trump essentially won in 2016 because of his promise to fill a vacant court appointment. We knew there was one to appoint because Mitch McConnell, of course, did his famous thing where he held in that election years and basically they didn't ever vote on Merrick Garland, who Obama tried to nominate that summer. And Mitch McConnell's position was, look, we've got an election coming up. We will let people decide who the president is, and that will be who gets to decide the Antonin Scalia's spot on the Supreme Court. So we knew in November when we went and voted, the person we were voting for was going to get to pick a Supreme Court justice. Now, we can complain all we want about if that was fair or not, because then, of course, right at the end of Trump's term, same exact thing happens with Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and they replace it. So essentially now, it seems the norm is that if you're the president and you're in power and you don't control the Senate, I would say you're not going to be able to count on filling that Supreme Court justice spot. I don't love that. I really wish that we were back. I don't love it. I just don't. I really wish that I think the Senate should do a good job of saying this person is qualified. They're not qualified, but the way the Constitution is written, I think we should do it. I don't love it. I think, Mitch McConnell, of course, blamed it on Democrats because they had gotten rid of the filibuster to do lower court judges. Or no, wait, they got rid of it for another reason, and then Republicans used it to fill judge positions with only 51 votes instead of 60. So, this is a lot of someone doing something bad, and then the other party using that as an excuse to also do something bad. And we've gotten to a point where we are going to be in a situation where if Democrats control the Senate, they will get rid of the filibuster entirely for everything. And I don't love that because I think the Senate is supposed to be a slow, deliberative body. And anyway, this is all a little beside the point, but I do wish they would just approve or disapprove of the nominee that the president puts in front of them, regardless of the party. I'm fine with them checking that person, saying, nope, that person's not qualified. Give us someone else. I think that's totally within their purview. But the truth is, that's where we're at. So there's very likely going to be a Supreme Court appointment in the next 4 years. Two of the judges are pretty old. They're both conservative justice, Thomas and Alito. So chances are one of them will leave in the next 4 years or die. Just a decent chance of that. Really, and I think Sotomayor is oldish too. She just doesn't look it. So, we've got some older judges. Obviously, I trust Trump more on this only because he in 2016, he released a list of who he would put. I think he's done that since. I have not read it, but obviously I don't trust who Kamala Harris is going to put on the Supreme Court, specifically because Kamala would pack the court if she got the Senate. That's the simple truth. If Democrats win the Senate, Kamala Harris will go with Biden's plan and try to pack the Supreme Court. And they're going to do it in a neat way. They're trying to say, oh, it's about ethics. It's about term limits. The Constitution plainly says that you cannot place term limits on the Supreme Court. So they're going to try to make a law that says, oh, what we're going to do is let every president nominate 2, and the most recent 9 will get to vote on the big cases. The other ones are still on the Supreme Court. We've not kicked you off the Supreme Court. We just don't let you vote on the important cases. This is court packing by a different name, and it's dangerous, and it's wrong. It's unconstitutional. If Democrats get a hold of the Senate, they will do it. They've said as much. They have the plan right now. They want to do it. They just don't have 60 votes. If they can manage now, maybe there are a couple Democrats that are hold out. There are Democrats right now in the Senate that are saying, I would not go along with that. Now they're saying that on the campaign trail, but would they then go along with it if it came to it? I actually, we had Kristen Sinema and Joe Manchin that were preventing the Democrats from busting up and getting rid of the filibuster, but they're gone. So you're not going to have those two anymore. So will there be other Democrats that stand up and go, no, we're going to stand up for constitutional norms? Maybe. Because like I said, if anyone wins the Senate, it's going to be like a 50-50 tie or 51-49. It's going to be very, very close. It only takes 1 or 2 people from a party to say, actually, I don't like this. I'm not going to go along with it. But that's what she wants to do, is pack the Supreme Court. I think that would be very dangerous. I think it would totally delegitimize the one branch of government that I think is more legitimate than the other two, even when you look at polls. So I think it's a bad idea. I obviously trust Trump more on this. But in no way is it something that convinces me that I've got to vote for him because, I need a Supreme Court pick. I do think the Supreme Court right now is pretty great as far as they are doing the things that I want the Supreme Court to do. I want it to claw back the power that Congress has given the executive branch. And they're starting to do that. And I am for that because I think the executive branch has way too much power. I think we've given a single executive at the top of the federal government way more power than he was ever meant to be. He just wasn't meant to have that much power. The way the Constitution was set up, the Congress was supposed to have the power. They've abdicated that to the executive branch. That concerns me. What I don't like about the Supreme Court stuff is that what every president is doing now is they're signing executive orders that they know are illegal and unconstitutional, but they're doing it to get the press and to get, like, Biden's done this with student loans over and over and over again. He keeps trying to say, I'm going to forgive student loans because that's what I promised. It's his young constituency and his, the liberals tend to be college educated now. So he's like, I'm going to give a handout to these people because they're going to vote for me. And then it gets struck down in the court. And then he claims, well, this is an illegitimate court because they struck down my executive order that I knew was illegal. This is asinine. Trump did it. Bush did it. Obama did it. Everyone's doing this now. And it drives me crazy because it delegitimizes the court for doing what their job is to say, yeah, no, this was illegal. You knew it was illegal. And so we're striking it down. I don't like any of this Supreme Court stuff. I also don't want the Supreme Court to be the focus that it is. The truth is, we get these controversial things that are maybe 5-4 or 6-3 on a handful of cases. The truth is most of these Supreme Court cases are 8-1 or 9-0. The Supreme Court does a good job. And honestly, this Supreme Court, if you pay attention to it, has been kind of weird. Sometimes Amy Coney Barrett is with the liberal justices. Sometimes Jackson has been with the conservative judges. So it's kind of weird. It's not this weird 6-3 thing all the time. Sometimes it's 6-3 and it's not the 6 conservative judges together. It's like one of the liberals comes over. So they're taking really interesting cases. I think these are important cases. I think Supreme Court is very important, but it's also very important that both sides stop delegitimizing the courts. You can complain about a verdict. You can complain about their decision. You can say, I don't like this. Here's why I think it's wrong. But don't call them illegitimate. When Kamala Harris says Trump handpicked 3 judges, yeah, she's making that sound nefarious. It was his job to do so. He was the president. Now we'll take away the one for Scalia's seat if you want to. I'm just tired of the delegitimization of the courts. Okay, let's go to the border and immigration. That is another important thing. Although it's dropped in importance since this election sort of started, and part of that's probably because Biden actually kicked in executive orders that he had undone of Trump's. We have seen a slow in the border crossings over the last couple of months. He only did those executive orders in like April or May though. So, we're just seeing the stuff, but we're not seeing every day on the news the videos and pictures of the, sort of hundreds of thousands of people coming over the border every month. It is a humanitarian crisis. It's also a just like logistical nightmare that what we have on the border right now is right now we have millions of people that have claimed asylum, and they have asylum cases that will go before judges in like 7 years. That's when their appointment is. This is untenable. We have to change our immigration policy. So Kamala's is kind of weird. She says she would sign the bill that Trump killed. So that was a bipartisan bill. James Lankford, Kristen Sinema, and I forget the other one. It was basically a Democrat, independent, and Republican came up with the bill. Like I said, this was sort of sanctioned by Trump, and then he decided he didn't want the Biden to get the win in the election year. I've talked about this over and over again, that I think that the dumbest thing that Trump did was kill that bill. I think what he should have done is gone to Capitol Hill and been on camera working with Republicans and independents and Democrats to say, hey, you know what? I'm going to fix the border even though I'm not president. I'm going to get it done. And who cares if Biden signs the bill? I'm going to get the credit for it. And I'm going to say, look what I did. This is if I'm Trump. Look what I did when I'm not even the president. Like, I'm not even the president right now. And I got a border bill done that no one said was possible. It's done. We're fixing the border. Trust me, elect me, because I will continue to fix the border more if I'm the president. I'll get everything you want. I think he made a grave mistake by killing that border bill, because I think it would have been largely popular. People want across the board, people want us to have a better immigration policy and have border security. this is a very popular thing, even with Democrats, in reasonable ways. Obviously, Trump talks about deporting 11 million people. I don't think that's possible, and that's less popular probably. But, so Kamala's bill, she said she would sign that bill. That bill added like 1,500 agents to the border. It added detection technologies, specifically talks a lot about fentanyl and drug stuff and human trafficking. The claims are that the border crossings were at their lowest level in 4 years, which is sort of true. She's saying in June, illegal crossings did lower. They ticked up in July and August. It was the lowest number since January 2021, which is not technically 4 years. And that's sort of like bragging about. It's interesting because the reason the numbers went up so much after January 2021 is because Biden's executive orders and undoing Trump stuff. So Biden caused the numbers to go up. So I don't understand why he or Harris should get credit for them going back to the levels that they were when Trump left office. It's kind of a silly argument. The truth is Trump has the edge on this one. So, Biden and Harris are absolutely responsible for that influx that we had over the last 4 years and the asylum backlog and all that kind of stuff. I don't understand why we're supposed to pat her on the back for this. So they signed the executive orders and get back to the numbers that we had when Trump left office. That just doesn't seem like worthy of a pat on the back. It, to me, proves that Trump's policies were better. Now, I'm not for all of Trump's policies. Trump's policies are he wants to deport all of 11 million illegals in the country. That seems impossible. We don't have the law enforcement to do that. We don't even know where some of these people are. I think that's complicated. You're also dealing with kids that have been born here since those people have come over. What are you doing with that? So if someone comes across the border illegally, they have a child here, that child is an American citizen, that is constitutionally protected. You can't change that. Are you going to send the parents back home, leave the kid here? I don't know. These are real questions we have to figure out how to solve. Do I think we should deport people that are violent or commit crimes? Absolutely. I think the second you commit a crime, the second you do anything violent at all, we kick you out of the country, period, end of story. You do not have the same rights as someone that crosses our border as an American citizen. You just don't. I don't think we should be paying for your health care. I don't think, if Trump was smart, he would only be quoting Democratic mayors in cities like New York and Chicago. They're saying, we can't handle this. This is a humanitarian nightmare. It's a logistical nightmare. It's a public works nightmare. It's all of these. It's a problem. And you're hearing that from the mayors of places like New York and San Francisco and Chicago, people that are being overrun with some of these immigrants. So I think, I go back to the stunt that Greg Abbott did in Texas where he was busing people to cities like Chicago and New York. And people didn't like it because it was a political stunt with human beings, and I get that. However, I do think that's the right way to bring attention to a problem. That's a real problem with immigration, and Greg Abbott said, why should Texas bear the brunt of all of these people that are coming in? We're going to, if you're a sanctuary city and you're like, hey, yeah, bring on immigrants to the United States, which I'm all for immigrants. I just want them to do it the legal way. And we need to fix the legal way so that they can do it the legal way. But yeah, send them to Chicago. Let Chicago take some of the brunt of this. And it worked. You had Democratic mayors saying, the mayor of New York said, New York's not going to be New York anymore. It was something to that tune. So I think Trump should be quoting those people. It became a problem that was much more on the radar for everyone in the country, including some, blue cities. But I don't necessarily think he also wants to seal the border, I guess, with a wall that he claims to have already built in his first administration, although he only added 50 miles of wall. He repaired mostly already existing stuff. I think a wall is good in some parts. It's not necessary in some parts. I think we need to use technology more than walls sometimes in some of these areas. He wants to reinstate the Remain in Mexico, although I'm not sure that's possible. There was a policy basically during his administration where if you came to Mexico trying to get to America from another country, the policy we had with Mexico is like those people stay in Mexico. They don't come to America, even if they're trying to claim asylum. They need to claim asylum in the first country they come to, because they're going through, if you're coming from South America, you're going through a lot of countries you could claim asylum in before you get to the United States. It's clear that they want to be here. Which, by the way, this goes to Trump's kind of point. Trump's always saying America's this terrible country. Well, then why are so many people trying to come here? Like, I don't like that Trump and MAGA has become this country is a terrible place to be. I don't think it's a terrible country. That used to kind of be the liberal line, and all of a sudden it's become the Republican line, and I don't like it. So we need a border policy. We need an immigration policy. We need more resources. We need more judges. We need be able to get through more asylum cases. We need to legitimately hear asylum cases, because there are people coming from countries like Haiti, in South America, Central America, that are run by gangs. Venezuela, economy is totally collapsed. Haiti is literally ran by gangs right now. There is no government, essentially. If you're fleeing that place, I am for America being the place that those people come. I just think that we need some checks to make sure that you are not a gang member, for example. There's been some stories you've probably heard about gang members taking over places in like Aurora, Colorado, I think was one of them. There's some truth to them in the sense that, yes, there are Venezuelan gangs in America now. That's because there's not an economic opportunity for them to make money in Venezuela because the economy is so bad. So they've moved to other countries, neighboring countries mostly, but some of them have ended up here. And that is a nature of Venezuela's economy crashing. It's not what Trump is claiming where they're sending those criminals here. That's not what's happening. Those criminals are coming here because there's not an economic opportunity for them to make money where they're at currently. So we do need vetting. He's for stopping sanctuary cities, which I kind of go, well, if you seal the border and you deport illegals, then sanctuary cities you don't even need to mention it, right? If you could really do those things. I just think he knows that he can't really deport 11 million people. So I think Trump's the winner on the border by like a mile. And I think this is the one thing that's keeping him in this race as close as it is because I think everyone can see with their eyes that he was more right on the border than Biden and Harris have been. Biden and Harris are trying to course correct now in the last 6 months. I don't know if people will believe that that's long term, but I do think it would be a good thing if we got that border bill passed. As much as Trump tried to kill it and say it was terrible, that had a lot of conservative wins in it. And it's because Democrats were in a desperate position. This was at the top of the polls. It was economy and the border when we were having, 300,000 people come across the border in like December of last year. I think that was the number. Don't quote me on that. So it was a bigger deal in December and everyone, and last fall, it was a big deal. And so Biden knew he was going to have to sign a border deal to not have this be an issue for reelection. In this way, I think that's good. Politics did what it needed to do. He needed to get reelected. He knew he had to work with the Republicans. Republicans kind of had him where they wanted him. So I think that border bill would be good. It's not perfect, but it's better than, we have not signed any kind of immigration reform since the 80s. So I think we should do that. Okay, let's go to foreign policy. After I drink a little water. I probably should have led with this because I think foreign policy is the most important thing that a president can do, especially right now. We're in a situation where you've got Russia, Ukraine, you've got Israel, Gaza, and Israel is soon to be Hezbollah to Lebanon in the north. You've got obviously China doing all sorts of saber rattling and encroaching on people's airspace and testing the waters on if they can invade Taiwan. You've got Iran meddling in all throughout the Middle East. I mean, really, when we talk about Israel, Gaza, and Israel, Hezbollah, we're really talking about Israel versus Iran. That's really what we're talking about. There was an absolutely insane story today about apparently Israeli intelligence not only hacked, but like got to the manufacturing of pagers that Hezbollah fighters are using and blew up simultaneously like 1,000 of them. Killed a bunch of people, injured a bunch of people. Like, these are Hezbollah terrorists. Infiltrated the manufacturing place where they got their pagers because they're using pagers instead of cell phones. This is like some movie stuff going on. So this is escalating all the time. It's not stopped. I'll include a link to an article in the show notes about how we misunderstand World War I's kind of start and end dates and World War II's start and end dates. And we think of them as this is the catalyst. It was the Archduke that got, well, really the lead up to World War I was a lot more complicated than that. And his theory is that really all these world wars are just little conflicts that are sort of connected, and then they get more and more connected, and then you get every world power involved. Well, so let's just look at the world powers that are involved right now. And if people are like, are we already in World War III? I don't think we're in World War III, and I wouldn't call it that because most of this is proxy stuff. Iran's not actually attacking Israel, although they did try one time. They're funding terrorist groups like Hezbollah and Hamas to attack Israel. And right now, it's Israel versus Hamas and Hezbollah. There's obviously an Iran connection there, but like, and certainly they're taking out specific people in Iran, but they've not attacked Iran specifically. And Same thing with Russia, Ukraine. You got Russia invading Ukraine. So very, has some certain similarities to World War I and World War II, where people are taking over territories that are sovereign. And so I think we're in a very dangerous situation. We're also in a situation where I don't think our Defense Department I don't think the Pentagon is prepared to do a multi-front war. It looks like the smart people I read say America could not do a two-front war right now. So if we got involved in a conflict, we're going all in on that conflict at the expense of maybe leaving ourselves vulnerable to another one. So it's like, who's the focus? Is it Russia? Is it China? Is it Iran? Is it North Korea? I don't know. And right now, we don't have the military capacity to take a two-front war. We don't know at all if we can take on China right now. They have a big navy, but we don't know if they can actually do stuff. Russia sort of went into Ukraine. Everyone thought they would just crush Ukraine and get in Kyiv within the week. It's now been going on for a couple of years, and Russia has lost hundreds of thousands of soldiers. No one thought that was possible, but it turned out that Russia maybe wasn't as strong militarily as they projected they were. Could be the same with China. The point is, the next president is going to deal with some stuff that they are not going to see coming. That's how it always is. You can't plan this stuff. And we can't learn really enough about either one of the candidates in a debate format either, because it's just not, you can't ask someone, what's your foreign policy position going to be on something like this? I mean, it's just more complicated than that. So the basic point is that Trump says he would end the war in Ukraine, but he does not specify how. He just says it wouldn't have happened under his watch. I think he does have some credibility there. It is true that Russia did not invade anyone while Trump was president. They did it under George W. Bush. They did it under Obama. They've done it under Biden. They didn't do it under Trump. Who knows why? Now, Trump, contrary to popular belief, was tougher on Russia, even though with his words, he was not. His administration was tougher on Russia than any president, than Obama or Biden, who bookended him. Okay? He was. I don't know if he would hire the people that would continue to be. He says he supports Israel. So does Harris. I think Harris is more right on Ukraine than Trump is. I think Trump doesn't like Ukraine for the wrong reasons. Let's have a conversation if we want to about, should we support them? Do we need an end game? Like, how should we support them? I'm fine with all those talks. Should we meddle at all? But I don't like the idea that Trump seems to just not like Ukraine. I don't understand how you could be for Israel in their conflict, but not for Ukraine in their conflict. They seem very similar to me. So I think Harris actually kind of wins, but neither one of them have mentioned defense spending. It was averaged at 5.8% under Reagan. Of course, we were in the Cold War. It's now at 2.9% of GDP. We're not spending enough on defense. We need to spend more on defense. You hear both sides talk about the defense industrial complex. I'm not saying we couldn't lower the cost of some of these things, but we need to spend more money. We need to have more weapons. Trump wants to build like an Iron Dome sort of thing across the entire country. Seems not very likely. I mean, Israel's works because they're a very, very small country. It seems a lot harder to protect the United States from intercontinental ballistic missiles. Although, depends where they're being launched from. So, who do I think would be better in a crisis? I don't know. I really think neither one of these are great. Kamala is such a sheet in the wind that I have no idea what she would actually do. My only hope would be that she would hire good people that she would listen to. It's sort of been proven in her campaign. She's willing to listen to people, but I cannot imagine someone who's scared to death of doing a press conference or doing a tough interview. How is she going to go toe to toe with Putin or Xi Jinping? I don't understand how that happens, right? So she seems not like the strength that we need in this moment for these kind of negotiations. Trump has more of that, but I worry that he'll just go, he's kind of a sheet in the wind too, whoever kind of has his ear last. So, I think it's kind of a toss up here. I just don't think that I don't really trust either one of these to be in charge of the United States military and to be woken up at 2 a.m. with a decision to be made. I just don't. And I've seen no evidence that Kamala Harris has any sort of foreign policy ideals. It doesn't seem like, I've not really heard her expand on why should we support Israel? She's never mentioned Hamas very much in most of her stuff. I mean, she mentions the part about Hamas attacking Israel and Israel should have the right to defend themselves, but she talks about a 2-state solution without mentioning Hamas has to go. There can be no 2-state solution when the party in power in Gaza suspended elections. They've not had elections since 2005 or 2006. And they're ruling with iron fists, and The truth is, most of the funding that's coming from the UN and other countries is going to support these terrorists. It's not going to feed the citizens. Hamas does not care about the citizens, the Palestinian citizens in Gaza. They care about themselves. That's why they use them as human shields. So for her not to mention that Hamas has to go, part of a two-state solution would be Hamas has to be eliminated. They cannot be in Gaza anymore. And like I said, no one on the Democrat side is really talking about how Iran's the problem. And Iran has been this weird thing where Obama did this Iran nuclear deal because he really wanted it. It was not good. It was a bad deal. Trump got out of it. Biden's been desperate to get back into it. And so he's kind of always appeasing Iran too, and always worried about escalation with Iran. Iran should be scared of us. We shouldn't be scared of Iran. That's my foreign policy boilerplate. Like, that's it. That's where I think we should be. And I think Trump does better at that than Harris, maybe. But if he doesn't hire good people, and he did hire good people in his first term, but he fired them all, or they all left because he wanted to do something illegal or a war crime, or they had strong disagreements about stuff. He's not hiring any of those people. He's hiring yes men. He's going to hire, Laura Loomer has his ear. She's a conspiracy, racist nut job, and that is his closest confidant right now. If he has those kind of people around him, it is going to be bad. But I also think, we can live and die by Kamala's people that she puts around her. I just trust her a little bit more on the foreign policy thing. The truth is, the differences between parties is pretty narrow when it comes to foreign policy. They can talk a big game going into the election, but you look, Bush, Obama, Trump, Biden, there's not a lot of movement between any of those on foreign policy stuff. I think you get hit with reality when you get into the White House. And those decisions are tough. I don't begrudge someone having to make them, but I just don't know that either one of these are great. So look, there's a lot of ridiculous claims in all these policy stuff, like that Trump could end inflation, that he could make prices go down, that he could stop outsourcing entirely. He wants to do this by doing tariffs. He wants to say they're not going to do any federal government contracts with companies that outsource any of their labor or manufacturing. I think this just makes everything more expensive for everyone. I think it's a terrible idea just to try to revive manufacturing in America when manufacturing jobs get paid less than the average wage in America. So they're getting less than the average wage in America, manufacturing does. So people aren't wanting to go to those jobs. Right now we have 8.2 million jobs openings and 7.2 million people unemployed. We have enough people to fill jobs. They're just not taking them. So Harris, the fact that she thinks she can control prices from Washington is ridiculous. The fact that she thinks rent control is going to work is going to be ridiculous. So both these people have very dangerous policies. As far as the most dangerous ones that I listed, I think the most dangerous thing about Harris is that if Democrats win the Senate, even with 50-50, I think that they'll get rid of the filibuster and they will start doing things like passing a right to abortion. I think they will pass their Supreme Court thing that tries to do term limits if it doesn't get then struck down by the Supreme Court, which is a weird thing, by the way. I don't think Congress is supposed to be able to check the Supreme Court like that. So I think that's really dangerous. And I think Trump's most dangerous thing is his 20% tariffs and the sort of isolationist stuff that he wants to do. I think that the combination of the economic stuff and the foreign policy stuff will ruin the economy, and it will make America weaker, and I think those are bad. So I think they both have very dangerous things. I think they could both be potentially bad presidents. Actually, I'm going to go ahead and go out on a limb. I would say I think both of them will be bad presidents, either one of them, whoever wins. So I think this next president is going to face very serious challenges, both foreign and domestic. And if Harris wins right now, she'll likely have to do all of her stuff that she wants to do without control of Congress, because it looks like Republicans may keep the House. House is a little hard to judge right now, and will probably take the Senate with 51 votes. If they win Montana, Republicans have 51 people in the Senate, Democrats have 49. So I think that that's the most likely scenario right now. Like I said, we're 48 days out from the election. That's the best thing I think that we can do if Kamala Harris is elected, is just make sure there's a check on her where she doesn't have the House and the Senate as well. Because I think lately the thing that everyone does is they get in there, they win very, very close races as president, and they win tiny majorities in the House and the Senate. And they think that's a mandate to do all of their pipe dream stuff. Biden did this. Trump did this. I think that's the bad lesson to learn in that situation. It always gets blowback in the midterms. I have no doubt she would do the same thing. I think she's kind of a pushover. And so I don't think she'd be smart and do the smart political thing that's popular. I think she'll go with what her party and her liberal base wants to do. So, and I think Trump is kind of in the same boat. I think Trump, if Trump gets elected, I would hope that it's the opposite. I would hope that Democrats control one of either the House or the Senate, because I frankly don't trust either one of these people to be the president. I just don't. So I think they need some checks, and it's not been proven that Republicans will keep Trump in check, because they'll just go along with whatever he wants to do for the most part. I think that wasn't the case in his first term, because Mitch McConnell said, no, I'm not going to get rid of the filibuster for you. And he had Paul Ryan saying, no, I'm not going to do that thing either. That's not going to be in it. He's going to have full MAGA people in control of everything. So split. We want split Democrat, Republican split on power. That's what I want. So that is all for this episode. Thank you for spending some of your valuable time with me. I have one ask for you. If you'll go to thehomelessconservative.com, you can sign up for my email list, and I'll ping you about updates and things that you want to pay attention to. If I have two asks, though, I would ask you to rate and subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to it. That is it for me. I will talk to you next time.